Hello and welcome to SL Chennai Speaks Out Season 2. I'm Sanjay Pinto. Now, many believe that if Steven Spielberg were to do a film on the scams in India, he'd probably call it Swindler's List. So entrenched, ladies and gentlemen, has corruption become in our country, in our society, that every day almost we hear of a new scam. Not long ago, it was the Commonwealth Games scam, followed by the Adarsh Housing Society scam, followed by the 2G Spectrum scam, perhaps the biggest of them all in India ever, and more recently, the loan scam. And what's really shocking and disturbing is that even before the fire of one scam can die out, a fresh one erupts. Now, I'm only reminded of a recent status update on Facebook, which said, in fact, spoke of double standards in our country. When a poor man picks someone's pocket because he's hungry and he wants to buy a loaf of bread, he's caught by the police, beaten black and blue, sent to jail, sometimes even dies in police custody. But when ministers rob the country of hundreds and thousands of crore rupees, some of them are not even questioned. Toothless hounds, are they guarding our public morality? Have we as a society perfected the art of making a pretense, a big show of fighting corruption? Has civil society completely squandered its power of disapproval of corruption? Is our battle against corruption today a mere knee-jerk reaction or a sustained campaign? That's the proposition on SL Chennai Speaks Out today. We are joined by an eminent panel, Mr. V.R. Lakshminarayanan, former Director General of Police of Tamil Nadu and also former CBI Director, a person who's spent about 16 years of his career fighting corruption. Along with Mr. V.R. Lakshminarayanan, Mr. Chris Dev, who's an RTI activist, someone who also belongs to Transparency International, who exposes criminal antecedents of candidates before elections. Both Mr. Lakshminarayanan and Mr. Chris Dev believe that it is a knee-jerk reaction, that we are not doing enough. On the other side of the divide, we've got Mr. Vishwanath Swamy, who's an activist, somebody who's fought against fake godmen, someone who's always a thorn in the flesh of the establishment. Joining Mr. Vishwanath Swamy on the panel is Mr. Banu Kumar, who's the Executive Director of Fifth Pillar, an organization formed to fight corruption. But it's important to also get a political perspective on this debate, which is why we are going to be joined live by Mrs. Jayanti Natarajan, Senior Congress spokesperson, a former Union Minister and a Supreme Court lawyer as well. Ma'am, thank you very much for joining us on SL Chennai Speaks Out. Ma'am, the public perception here is that it requires a public outcry. It requires opposition pressure for the government of the day to actually crack the whip and take action against corrupt bigwigs. Your response, ma'am?
Whether it's among bureaucrats or whether it's among in the legal system or whether it's in the media, if you talk about paid news, problems like that. So corruption exists everywhere. It's not just in the political system. And I think in every walk of life, people have to speak out against corruption, and those who are fighting it at every level should continue to fight it.
All right, ma'am, what about, is the fight against corruption limited to mere resignations? What about actually getting to the bottom of that ill-gotten wealth?
Well, certainly that ill-gotten wealth should be recovered from those who are guilty. But in the process, I think that we should ensure that the focus is kept upon those who are responsible and those who actually committed the crime. And as I said, we should remember not focus only upon easy targets, the politicians, but focus upon the corruption at every level, the bureaucrats, for example, the judiciary, for example. We should always look at the corruption. It's wrong, and I think becomes very lopsided in a democracy if focus is kept upon only one section.
Ma'am, how do you respond again to the charge that the CBI in our country is not impartial, that the CBI acts as a stooge of the party in power and is used to target political rivals?
I don't think there's a single, it's the easiest thing to say about the CBI. It's totally wrong in terms of this particular government, the UPA 1 and UPA 2. We don't use it as a political tool in any way. It's the easiest thing for anybody accused of corruption to say that CBI is being used as a political tool. And in cases where the contrary, where they say the CBI is not doing enough, we forget that almost always it's followed up by a case in the court, and the Supreme Court has been repeatedly monitoring many cases. It's not possible for the CBI to get away, and it's very demoralizing for an investigative agency to be constantly faced with so much unfair criticism.
Ma'am, be honest, does coalition politics force your hand, force you to go soft on allegedly corrupt allies?
Well, Mr. Raja resigned, and coalition politics means that we consult each other, but the responsibility is collective, and collectively action has been taken every time there has been a prima facie case proved in the UPA regime, whether it was UPA 1 or UPA 2.
Ma'am, also many people believe that, again, case of double standards. When it comes to officials, we are quick to crack the whip. As we've seen recently with the financial institutions, LIC, the loan scam where officials, top officials were arrested, but ministers have not even been questioned. Even the Supreme Court had to point that out, ma'am.
I think that's a completely erroneous impression. There are many senior bureaucrats who are involved in different issues, and the CBI arrests whoever it has to arrest.
Arrest whoever it has to arrest. Final question to you, ma'am. Recently, we saw the Prime Minister giving Mr. A. Raja, the scam-tainted minister, an affectionate pat on the shoulder at a function in New Delhi. The BJP is crying foul, saying that what signal are we sending out to the country when the case is being heard in the Supreme Court?
No, I would go even further to say that I think the criticism has sunk to the level of being almost ridiculous, if you'll forgive me for using that word. The Prime Minister has worked with Mr. Raja for many years, and I don't believe that we can sink to the level of questioning the Prime Minister, patting someone on the back. If that is the level of criticism in this country, I don't think there's much hope for our democracy. And I think it's the BJP is pretty bold to even mention this, having announced an inquiry against Yediyurappa and continuing him as the Chief Minister of Karnataka. I think that's BJP is utterly guilty of double standards in this regard.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am, for joining us.
I joined service in 1952. And when I was a superintendent of police, I went to, we never knew that there was an anti-corruption department even. And we never felt the need for an anti-corruption department. That is how things were. And when I went to Nagaland, I can tell you that the first offense of corruption in Nagaland was committed by an Indian police service officer who had been on deputation. They didn't know what corruption was. One state where till 1961-62, there was not a single man who knew what corruption was, but we went and taught them how to be corrupt. And corruption was at the lower level, the osmotic pressure, slowly from the lower level it started going up. Now I find, at the end of the day, I find that it is descending from top, because we never thought of a sub-magistrate may get a car from an advocate for going somewhere for a function. But today you saw what the Supreme Court said about the Allahabad High Court. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Everywhere, because integrity is a casualty in all our activities. There is no point in blaming politicians alone, because we had good politicians. We don't have so many good politicians here. I was lucky in service, 17 years. I had the longest innings in the CBI. But I had the good luck to serve under very good officers in the state. Kamaraj was the chief minister, then earlier Rajaji when I entered. This kind of thing goes on, and in Delhi, the last minister about whom I can say finest minister for putting down corruption was Charan Singh, otherwise discredited by everyone. I have served under various people. With Nehru and all, it was accepted that there was nothing, there was no compromise at all. He will say, damn it, that's what he used to tell the director of CBI. He says, this case is going on, damn it, get it done, send it to the court so that I can tell these fellows, go and engage a good advocate if you are innocent, don't come and bother me. But today, we introduced after 1980 a new provision in the Indian Criminal Procedure Code. Earlier, a case will be disposed of by the police as undetected, or sent to court, prosecuted, or mistake of law, mistake of fact, and court will say acquitted, discharged or convicted, 3 only. Now it is disposal by withdrawal of the case. Politics have entered in criminal justice. That is the development over the course of all these years. And we started with an SP, and we have now got elaborate setup for putting down corruption, and corruption is growing.
Are we doing enough to fight corruption? I think that's itself, the premise is wrong. It should ask, are we doing anything at all to fight corruption? I would have appreciated such a topic, because we are hardly doing anything. As Mr. V. R. Lakshminarayan said, today there is nothing which is transparent in this country. If you take the newspaper articles, he just mentioned one which says something rotten in Allahabad High Court. Another article says the common man is losing faith in judiciary. And Jayanti Natarajan has said common man is losing faith in everything. She says don't target only politicians. She says don't single us out. Everybody is involved in this whole process. The whole system is rotten, and it is time that we cleanse the whole system. How do we go about doing it is what we need to discuss. See, it's open secret that corruption is the order of the day. Okay, and we have more and more machinery to check corruption. That means corruption is growing further. What we saw in the earlier years, Mr. Lakshminarayan said he joined service in 52. I was not even born then. I was born in 55. I'm sure most of you in the crowd here must have been born much later. So what we are seeing is total degeneration of standards at all levels, and we need to curb this. It is a cancer of the society, and we need to any minor surgery will not do. It has to be a major surgery to get over this problem. Let us debate this further.
All right, thank you very much, Chris. Surgery alone won't help. Perhaps you need chemotherapy for society here. Yes, on to the other side of the motion to Mr. Vishwanath Swamy.
Yeah, people are as corrupt as the system allows them to be. See, each one of you, most especially young people, they have to ask themselves, see, what am I doing to prevent this? Corruption or not doing enough is not just a fancy word that, oh, everybody likes that word. Each one has to ask, what am I doing at my individual level? That's one thing. And at the institutional level, there is corruption is not only political, corruption is so many places, including the media. See, there is a paid news, right? So what I would say is, put the system in place. For example, the Press Council of India, who controls, that make them so stringent. Do you know at this point when I am talking, how many scams are going on underhand? Maybe in future suddenly we will come to know that. So one has to ask this question instead of talking, what am I doing to prevent corruption? For example, we travel in train. Well, we don't prefer to sit in RAC and travel overnight. Go and bribe them in this thing, try to get them in this thing. That's what I just want to emphasize, that instead of talking, one should try to do at individual level something about it.
All right, thank you very much. From an emergency quota to an emergency-like situation. Thank you very much, Mr. Swamy. Final arguments from Mr. Bhanukumar.
As you all know, there are already 4 pillars in society functioning day to day: the elected representatives, the bureaucrats, the judiciary and the media. When these functionaries, they don't do their job properly and regularly, there is necessity for the existence of a 5th pillar, and hence the name of the organization has come into existence. There are like-minded organizations like 5th pillar everywhere. For your information, no country is free from corruption. It is only in the intensity of corruption there is variation. There are countries like New Zealand, Sweden and Denmark which has got minimum corruption. There are countries like Somalia in South Africa, which is the lowest in the ebb, ranking 134 or something. India, as you know, probably many of you know, that is in the 81st to 84th rank. Until last year, as per the survey of Transparency International, it was in the 81st rank. This year, latest survey, it has slipped down to 84. So things are going from bad to worse. Something has got to be done. There is high-level corruption, middle-level corruption and low-level corruption. We are more concerned with the low-level corruption. High-level corruptions, the scams which you come across every day. Aadhar scam, Commonwealth Games. Today I could see in the Ndtv, Aadhar scam records have been stolen. Look at the drudgery behind it, the most worst part of things going on. The records connected where the Chief Minister has signed, Chief Secretary has signed, the records are being stolen. So something will have to be done. I don't say enough has been done on corruption. 100% job has been done on corruption, but a beginning has been made. Somebody will have to bell the cat. It is the student generation which they can do. The older generation cannot do so much. This corruption has been soaked in society. It cannot be overlooked or corrected over a period of time, 1 day or 1 year or 3 years. So a beginning has been made. We need the cooperation from all quarters. We can certainly wipe out corruption in the days to come, at least in 10 years. That is why we have covered our activities, so many district chapters, training on RTI, students against corruption, and the campaigns, human chains, and whatnot. We have been doing our best. We have made a beginning. We will have to do quite a good lot. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhanukumar. To quote the Chinese proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that's the reason why we have so many in the audience who are college students and who are youngsters, people you could probably enlist in your fight against corruption. But stay tuned to SL Chennai Speaks Out. We'll be back after a very short break with the next round. We'll test whether Mr. Bhanukumar's submissions are actually a lot of rosy optimism. Stay tuned.